I playfully labeled him my second choice, now he's my ex-husband. I always believed I was merely jesting, just a lighthearted remark, you see? You're my second choice, I told him, chuckling as if it were nothing of consequence. Yet here I find myself, seated in my car, clutching the divorce papers, pondering how everything spiraled to this point. My name is Jessica, I am 31 years old, and this is the tale of how a seemingly innocent joke unraveled the fabric of my marriage. It began with the familiar elements, family, children, the everyday rhythm of life. Sophia, our 7-year-old, and little Lucas, just 4, are the two kids. You're familiar with the experience. The entirety of your existence is centered upon them. The school runs, the birthday celebrations, maintaining the harmony of the household. I chose not to work, embracing the role of a stay-at-home mom, believing that this was sufficient. Yet, it seems that was the moment everything began to unravel. At that time, I was unaware that I was beginning to overlook the value of what surrounded me. My husband, David, was a diligent and dedicated worker. He would return home, weary from the long hours, and I would share the details of my day, discussing the children or voicing my frustrations about the house, and gradually, I found myself harboring resentment towards him. He consistently fulfilled his role, ever present and unwavering in his responsibilities. Yet, what of my own existence? What of my needs? I spent the entire day with the children, managing all the responsibilities. Attention eluded me, and with each passing moment, that frustration began to swell within me. On that Friday night, a rare moment unfolded, one blessedly devoid of the children. David endeavored to prepare a delightful dinner for us, while I savored a glass of wine. As we sat around the table, engaged in conversation, I casually made the remark. I can hardly recall what transpired before that moment. Perhaps it was the countless hours he had dedicated to overtime that week, or the sheer fatigue I felt from managing the kids. I simply let it slip, as if it were a jest. It's interesting to think about how different my life could have been if I had chosen another path in love. You are my alternative option. A chuckle escaped my lips. He did not. I caught a glimpse of it in his eyes, yet I convinced myself I could dismiss it. That was undoubtedly a foolish remark, wasn't it? Yet, it was far from foolish. It was sharp. I noticed the pain lurking in his gaze, yet I failed to pause and reflect on it. I initially perceived his behavior as sensitivity, but in hindsight, I realized that this was far from the truth. From that moment, the dynamics between us began to change. Small details. Minor disputes, despite the fact that we had never truly clashed in such a manner before. I gave it little thought. I inhabited a realm of my own creation. Embracing the role of a mother, tirelessly dedicating oneself to the children, while ensuring the household operates seamlessly. In contrast, David appeared more subdued, not as present. Then arrived the twilight hours. I would inquire about his recent activities, and he would respond with a lackluster answer. Occasionally, he would venture out for drinks with his friends after work, or so he claimed. I accepted it without hesitation. Perhaps I ought to have, yet I chose not to. I aimed to avoid coming across as controlling, and I definitely wished to steer clear of appearing as a nag. Yet, I sensed it. The gap widened, and with it, my anger intensified. Throughout the day, I found myself in solitude with the children, while he was out in the world, engaged in his work and living his own life. It began to gnaw at my thoughts. One evening, I observed that he was engaged in texting more frequently, yet I chose not to dwell on it. He was merely maintaining a sense of distance, nothing more. Yet, I suppose I longed for his return, for him to reclaim the essence of the man I had wed, the one who was once so attentive and engaged. Thus, I maintained my flow of humor, you see? To break the stillness, to seek a spark of response. As if it held no significance to me. Yet, beneath the surface, my feelings ran deeper than I ever revealed. Everything erupted one evening as I returned home sooner than expected after taking Sophia to her friend's place. As I entered our bedroom, I discovered him sprawled on the bed, phone in hand, engaged in a flurry of messages with someone unseen. Initially, I assumed it was merely a friend of his, but then I noticed the name, Olivia. My heart sank. Olivia? I was unfamiliar with Olivia. I fixed my gaze on him for a brief moment, and as he became aware of my presence, the color drained from his face. Uncertain of how to articulate my thoughts, I impulsively exclaimed, "Who the hell is Olivia?" He stood motionless. Initially, silence enveloped the moment. His gaze darted about, avoiding contact with mine at all costs. He finally declared her to be merely a coworker. Yet, there was an unsettling quality in the manner of his delivery that lingered in my mind. I held on tightly. Is it truly a coworker? It certainly appears otherwise. The guilt was palpable on his face, a silent testament to the unease that lingered in the air. Yet, in that moment, his feelings were far from my mind. My thoughts hadn't even wandered to our children. I simply sought to understand what was unfolding. What could have prompted him to send her a message? Our debate stretched on for hours, and by the conclusion, I found myself utterly convinced of his deceit. Fury consumed me to the point where clarity eluded my vision. The details of our conversation have slipped from my memory. Yet, the sensation lingers in my memory, that unsettling knot deep within me. Fury and envy. I shoved him back with greater force, and he reciprocated in kind. The chasm between us continued to expand, and I remained oblivious until the moment had passed me by. In retrospect, I realize the extent to which I pressured him. I recognize that I fell short of being the ideal wife, and I certainly did not embody the essence of a perfect mother. Yet, a fire of anger burned within me. I felt pain, yet my pride held me back from acknowledging it. Perhaps if I had refrained from crafting those jokes. Perhaps if I had simply opened up to him, expressed my feelings, rather than resorting to actions that only deepened my bitterness. Perhaps had I possessed a touch more self-awareness. Yet here I find myself, clutching these divorce papers, grasping the fragments of something I have shattered. And I find myself pondering whether I will ever reclaim it. If we ever return to the way things once were, I was the one who made that joke. However, I remain unconvinced that we will. Not after all that has transpired. Do you believe there were alternative paths I could have taken? Or was this the inevitable conclusion all along? Following that night, everything transformed. David began to linger longer at the office, and the strain between us became increasingly intolerable. The memories of those lengthy pauses during dinner linger, the way he would place his phone face down on the table, as if concealing a secret. I continued to fill the silence with laughter, masking my true feelings, as if everything was perfectly normal, as if nothing had transpired. Yet, beneath the surface, I sensed that we were coming apart at the seams. As the weeks slipped by, I endeavored to dismiss the mounting sense of unease that lingered in the air. I even reassured myself that I was being overly dramatic. Perhaps I was. It's possible that Olivia was merely a colleague, don't you think? Yet, as I pondered further, an unsettling realization began to take shape within me. On a sunlit afternoon, I decided to collect Sophia from school ahead of schedule. I had plans to meet a friend for coffee, yet I chose to surprise David at his home instead. I felt an urge to confront him, perhaps. I aimed to witness him in the very moment of his actions. Upon entering, the initial sensation that struck me was the aroma. It was peculiar, not reminiscent of a warm, home-cooked meal, but rather akin to an alluring fragrance. I entered our bedroom, and there, on the bed, lay David. He found himself in the company of others. Olivia sat beside him, laughter spilling from her lips, her legs elegantly crossed on the bed as if they had found their perfect perch for hours. My heart plummeted into the depths of my stomach, and a surge of heat coursed through my veins. The details of what transpired afterward are a blur to me. I found myself frozen, my gaze locked onto them. David's eyes widened in surprise as he caught sight of me framed in the doorway. Yet, I found myself torn, uncertain whether my anger was directed at Kim or at her. Olivia sprang to her feet, as if poised to dash away, and in that moment, David leapt into action. "Jessica, this is not as you perceive it." His voice trembled, his words stumbling forth as if he were searching for the perfect expression, yet I found myself indifferent to it all. My chest constricted, and I found myself fixated on him, each wave of betrayal crashing over me with the force of a freight train. "Is that so?" I retorted. "What do you believe I perceive this to be, David? What on earth is happening here?" Olivia shifted uneasily, her gaze darting away from mine. She began to murmur something about the necessity of leaving, yet I found myself indifferent to her words. All my attention was devoted to David. "So, you've been covertly spending time with her?" I insisted, advancing with purpose, my voice rising in intensity. "So, this is how you've been passing your late nights, is it?" With deliberate slowness, David rose to his feet, his hands lifted in a gesture of defense. "It isn't quite that way." I interrupted him before he had the chance to complete his thought. "You are not being truthful. You resemble every other man. I poured my heart and soul into everything for you, David. I nurtured our family, our children, and you. Your loyalty seems to waver. You've been covertly engaging with this woman, and now you're attempting to manipulate my perception into believing it's insignificant? I found myself pacing the room, a tempest of anger rendering me unable to remain still. He attempted to voice his thoughts, yet each time he opened his mouth, I drowned him out with my shouts. As I continued to speak, a growing fury welled up within me, and I found myself unable to rein it in. He had wounded me, and I yearned for him to grasp the depth of the pain it caused. Olivia had departed by the time the argument reached its midpoint, and I found myself indifferent. David stood before me, his gaze unwavering, yet devoid of any hint of remorse or regret. I longed for him to plead for my forgiveness. I longed for him to say it was a mistake, that it held no significance, yet he remained silent. Instead, he simply stated, "I don't think this is working anymore, Jessica." Those words struck me with the force of a sudden blow. Do you really believe it's not effective? You're the one who's been playing games behind my back, and now you want to dismantle our entire family over some affair? Yet his expression remained unyielding. "I don't know what you want from me, Jessica," he said softly. "This cannot be mended, it is finished." The words failed to resonate immediately. It seemed to take quite some time for me to grasp the essence of his words. We had reached the end, and then, quite unexpectedly, a realization sparked within me. There was no sadness, no heartbreak, instead, a sense of relief washed over me. It was a profound relief to finally shed the facade I had been maintaining. It was a relief to realize that the burden of it all wasn't solely mine to bear. Yet, simultaneously, a wave of anger surged within me, a fierce fury directed at him for driving me to this juncture, for making me feel like I was an afterthought in my own marriage. I ought to have been more conscious of the pain I was inflicting on him as well. I ought to have noticed the fissures before they evolved into a gaping void, yet I failed to do so. And now I found myself in this moment, my family unraveling, with the weight of responsibility resting squarely on my shoulders. I had crafted the jests, distanced myself from him, and now I was facing the consequences. As David gathered his belongings and made his exit, the sound of Sophia's sobs echoed from the adjacent room. It felt as though all the things I had been evading came crashing down upon me in a single, overwhelming moment. I was not merely losing my husband. I found myself on the verge of losing my family. The ensuing months unfolded in a haze. Amidst the court papers and discussions with lawyers, there lingered the daunting task of finding the right words to explain to Sophia and Lucas that their father would not be returning home. It was chaotic, to put it mildly, yet I continued to hold David accountable. I convinced myself that I was merely a casualty in this unfolding drama, that I had exerted every effort possible, while he was the one who had derailed everything. Yet, beneath the surface, I was aware of the reality. I played a role in this. I had distanced myself from him. Engulfed in my own frustrations and insecurities, I failed to notice what was gradually slipping away until it was far too late. And now, here I find myself, solitary, tasked with the care of 2 children, navigating a life I never anticipated. Uncertainty lingers in my mind regarding any potential regrets about the course of events, yet one truth stands clear: the possibilities for a different outcome were certainly within reach. Were I to turn back the hands of time, I would have chosen a different path, yet alas, that possibility eludes me. At this moment, my only course of action is to gather the fragments and forge ahead. Ultimately, the divorce reached its conclusion. David achieved his desire. He departed with a blank canvas, unencumbered by ties, ready for a new beginning. He had the liberty to shape his existence in any way he desired. What about me? In the aftermath, I found myself grappling with the fragments of a life once whole, a family now fractured, and a truth that had caught me completely off guard. The memory of the final court hearing lingers vividly in my mind, as I sat opposite David, flanked by his lawyer on one side and my own counsel on the other. Fortunately, the children were absent. Their parents' disputes over the house and the settlement were not something they needed to witness. That was the final thing they required. Throughout the proceedings, David averted his gaze from me entirely. He exuded a sense of calm and composure, as if this were merely a matter of business to him. Perhaps it was. Perhaps it was simpler for him to let go, as he had long since distanced himself. Yet, for me, it unfolded in an entirely different manner. I found myself unprepared to release the bonds of the family we had forged, despite my role in its unraveling. I remained in that marriage for years, for the sake of the children, for the promise of stability. And now it seemed as though all of that had been in vain. It wasn't until I found myself with nothing that I truly understood the depth of what I had overlooked. I had always been the devoted wife at home, the one who held everything in place. Yet, I found myself compelled to face the truth of my own decisions. I had overlooked the fissures that were emerging in our marriage. I had become so absorbed in my own frustrations and insecurities that I allowed everything to slip through my fingers. In that process, I lost the man I believed I could rely on. And, most significantly, I lost my family. The most unfortunate aspect? The only person I could hold accountable was myself. David transitioned swiftly, as is the tendency of many men. He discovered a new companion. A person unfamiliar with the man I once adored, someone who encountered the version of him unburdened by the weight of my past attachments. And though I loathed to acknowledge it, a tiny fragment of my being harbored resentment toward her for that. Yet, beyond all else, I loathed my very being. I despised the way I had allowed everything to crumble, how I had permitted the anger and frustration to accumulate, until the moment arrived when it was far too late to mend anything. I found myself tasked with the solitary journey of reconstructing my life. Undoubtedly, there were instances of vulnerability. As I reflected on the possibilities that might have unfolded, I found myself pondering the potential for reconciliation. Yet, beneath the surface, I understood that there was not. The harm was irrevocably inflicted. David had turned the page. All that remained were the hard-earned lessons I had gathered along the way. I never aspired to be the type of woman who cast blame on others for her troubles, yet that had become my reality. In my relentless pursuit of blame, I had become ensnared in the role of the victim, oblivious to the part one played in the chaos surrounding us. In the stillness of my home, where the soft hum of the refrigerator mingled with the faint laughter of my children, I grasped the profound significance of that moment. Life would forever be altered. Though I may never reclaim what was once mine, one certainty remained clear to me. I shall never again overlook the value of my family, my husband, or the choices I make. Here I stand, embarking on the journey of single motherhood, striving to improve and to provide the best for my children. Yet, it proves to be a challenge, and on certain days, I find myself questioning if I will ever truly master it. Perhaps that is precisely the essence of it. Perhaps the errors I've committed are the sole path to my understanding. Perhaps, in the end, I will emerge from this experience even stronger. At this moment, my sole focus is on enduring the challenges ahead. To ensure my children remain unburdened by the shadows of my past missteps, to navigate the intricate path of self-acceptance in the aftermath of all that has transpired. And that is precisely my current position. Continuing to navigate the complexities of it all. Continuing the journey of discovery. I wish for those who may find themselves in circumstances similar to mine to glean wisdom from my missteps before the opportunity slips away.